Ashok Pandey, Chief Strategy Officer Airports with the GMR Group. As the person responsible for rolling out strategy development across the airport sector, his responsibility includes providing support in the areas of competitive as well as growth strategy. While the challenges for the existing airports in the GMR portfolio are significantly different across regions, value creation by leveraging synergies across the footprint is one of the key focus areas. Benchmarking with the best in class as a tool for continuous improvement and also helping in continuous monitoring of the business unit's performance from a strategic perspective is an important part of his responsibility. Mr. Pandey is a Bachelor of Technology from IIT Kanpur and is an MBA in Finance and Systems from Exhilarite Jamshedpur. He has close to 3 decades of experience in Tata Group and in particular Tata Steel, where he held multiple leadership roles. Prior to joining GMR Group, he served Tata Steel as Chief Group Strategy, where he was responsible for corporate strategy development with focus on business portfolio and monitoring the global steel industry, involving mapping of the competitive landscape for the industry. We welcome you, sir, today.
Who is this game? Okay. Okay, friends. Good morning to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be with you here at Shillong, in this beautiful, small, little serene campus. I'm truly delighted to be here with you. In fact, while I was in academics, it was my dream to get back to academics every decade at least once. It didn't happen because of compulsions in the corporate sector. Nevertheless, it's a pleasure to be at your campus. It has been happening with other campuses also occasionally, but not for pursuing something. So I'm truly delighted to be here. Now, today's session, I thought I can share my experience, our experience rather, of the public-private partnership, especially in the major infrastructure sector like airports in India. Although I'm new to this airport sector, as I was introduced having spent over 27 years with Tata Steel, or the Tata Group rather, and just about little over 2 years in GMR and looking after the airports portfolio. It has been an interesting journey, of course, in the last 2 years because the infra, of course, has been a very exciting area to grapple with. So let me get cracking with the presentation now. This is broadly the structure that I'm going to follow for today's session. Roughly it will take about 30 to 45 minutes. There's also a short video clipping on the making of Terminal 3 in Delhi. But post a video, I think we'll have the Q&A with you. Essentially, I'll start with the imperatives for global infrastructure. Recently, there was a McKinsey study which sort of brought out some of the key issues related to global infrastructures. The size of the global infra. Okay. Yeah. Is close to $57 trillion, the expected investments over next 12 to 13 years, or rather 17 years, up to 2030. So that's the size of infra cake that we are talking about globally. Some of the other challenges, like over $100 billion being spent in excess fuel costs in the United States alone because of poor infrastructure, because US, as you know, the infra was developed in the 60s and it's in a state which it requires major reinvestments in the United States also. So that's the state of infrastructure which leads to these kind of economic losses on such scales. In terms of opportunities, you have a pointer also? Not required. Okay.
So it's there actually. It's there.
In terms of opportunities, there, McKinsey has estimated that almost about $1 trillion of savings is possible through increasing infrastructure productivity. That's the size of potential savings that one can actually, the global economies can actually aim towards. Coming specifically to the emerging economies, most of the states across the globe have been facing severe challenges, severe constraints in terms of delivering inclusive development. One of them being the funding constraints, because countries like India also, they are short on capital. In fact, capital has been scarce for nations like India, primarily because of high deficits that the budgets have. There is lack of efficiency and accountability. There are political compulsions, as any imposition of fresh taxes and levies is resisted, as we are seeing in India, in fact, today. There is also a challenge as far as lack of skills are concerned, and technology as well. So, historically, governments have relied on private sector to fill in these gaps and get in private sector involvement into these large infra projects. If you look at some of the examples, the private sector has a long history. Let's look at the ports, which started getting privatized in the 80s, especially the ports in UK. The airports privatization, of course, started in the 1990s. It has been a relatively recent phenomenon, where Liverpool Airport in UK was the first one to be privatized. Of course, now the wave has intensified and all across starting from North America to Europe to emerging economies like Southeast Asia. There have been a wave of airports as a mode of generating surpluses for the governments. So they're increasingly following this model for developing critical infrastructure, because governments lack the necessary resources to support this. In terms of the models which are followed in public-private partnerships, essentially at the extreme end, on the left-hand side, you'll find the outsourcing model, where the private sector has got a limited role. It essentially looks at individual parts. It's not involved, it's not accountable for the service level commitments. On the extreme right, you see, which is complete privatization, and sectors like steel, cement, other industries are following this model, where it's totally open to demand-supply dynamics, and the government has no role to play in fixing the prices for these sectors. Between these two extremes, of course, we have the three structures of public-private partnership, which are essentially management contracts, the joint venture concession model, and we have the pure concession contracts. Starting with concession contracts in India, for example, the highways, which are getting modernized, which includes the Golden Quadrilateral, through concessioning out certain stretches of these national highways or the expressways to private sector. There are essentially two models. One is wherein there is a revenue share model, where the private developer who has the concession rights for, say, a 100-kilometer stretch. For example, let's take Shillong to Guwahati, for example, although it's not a part of the PPP model as of now. The commercial exploitation of these stretches, a part of the revenue shared with the government. So the government coffers uses that money to deploy that across other infra projects. The JV concession is a structure which is followed in case of airports, where government still holds a very important stake of 26%. Like in case of Delhi Airport, 26% is held by the Government of India through Airport Authority. And the third one, management contracts, which are again very close to outsourcing models, but the investment is still done by the government in case of management contracts. So if you look at some of the successful mega projects through the PPP route in India also, it's closer to 10,000 kilometers in terms of highways getting concessioned out. the metros, which are a critical part of now the urban infrastructure and also urban transportation in Mumbai, Bangalore, and Hyderabad, are essentially through the public-private partnership. The ports like the seaports like Paradip, Vizag, Cochin, Mumbai, etc. Parts of that ports are getting developed through the PPP model. And airports, of course, as we'll see, Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai, and Bangalore airports, and Cochin, the fifth one is missing here. These are the 5 airports where almost about 3/4 of the total air traffic is passing through these airports, which are now privatized. Let's look at, in the Indian context, how has our infra spend been increasing over the 5-year plan periods. If you look at the 10th 5-year plan, about $225 billion was spent on infrastructure, which was doubled to $500 billion in the 11th 5-year plan. And for the current 5-year plan, that's the 12th 5-year plan, the expected infra spend is close to $1 trillion. Of course, 1 year has elapsed and not much has happened because of the uncertainties that the nation is grappling with. But we hope that at least 80% of this targeted infra spend happens. But the important point that I would like to make here is that our infra spend has been increasing continuously. If you look at the 11th plan, almost about little over 7% was spent, 7% of the GDP was spent on infra. Unlike China, which has outgrown most of the economies across the globe, their share of infra spend is close to 9 to 10%, which is what acts as a trigger for economic development also in China. We are targeting about 8.2% for the current 12th 5-year plan. The other chart that you see next to it, you will see the private sector spending, private sector share in the infra spend, again is increasing from 25% to close to 50% in the 12th 5-year plan. So that's an important point, that the private sector share of the infra spend is going to increase quite significantly going forward. Coming to the aviation sector, which I belong to, although I have a limited experience of only 2 years, but nevertheless, the aviation infrastructure in the last decade, or last 4 or 5 years, I would say, has seen a complete transformation, especially of the metro airports that have got modernized. If you look at the traffic, closer to 2008 the beginning of last decade, in fact in 2000, it was less than 50 million passengers. Today, it's about 160 million air travelers which are using. In fact, to tell you about Delhi Airport also, before we took over Delhi Airport, the capacity of, not the capacity, but the utilization of Delhi International Airport was something like 14 to 15 million passengers per annum. Today it's about 36 million passengers, and hopefully with a bit of luck next year we'll see closer to 40 million passengers. So that's the kind of intensity of air travel which is increasing. And these great enablers have been these infrastructure like Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore airports, which have almost about 65% of the total market share. By 2020, in fact, it's expected that Indian aviation sector will become the 3rd largest in the world, serving more than 300 million passengers. In fact, there is one projection by KPMG which says about 400 million targeted air travelers. Just to briefly take you through the evolution of the policy regime, one can classify our aviation sector into these 3 distinct phases. Prior to 90s, wherein we were in a controlled regime, except for setting of civil aviation in 1927 and the Air Corporation Act of 1953, there was nothing significant which happened till 90s. It was in the 90s when the skies were opened up for private participation, and you had airlines like Damani Airways, East West, Modi Lufthansa, all such airlines coming into the Indian airspace. But the major deregulation started in the year 2000 onwards, where apart from private investment into airlines, even the airport infrastructure also was opened up for. If some of you recall the Delhi airport or even Mumbai airport prior to the transformation, you'll imagine what kind of a shift has happened in the airport infrastructure in this last 4-5 years. This, of course, as I mentioned, has been facilitated through the great involvement of private sector in these public-private partnership ventures. An average growth of 15 to 20% in air travel is what has been achieved, which is astronomical, in fact, going by global standards. The global aviation traffic increases just about by about 2 to 3% per annum only, whereas Indian air traffic has seen a growth of 15 to 20% the last decade. It's shaping up, but we expect that once we have political stability and we have greater clarity on the regulation, then we'll see another wave of growth in the air travel. Just to give some indication about what has been the passenger handled by these major airports. Delhi has handled close to 35 million last year. Of course, in the year previous to that, of course, we had handled more than 36 million. But because of the downturn last year and the sentiments being a little negative, Delhi saw a slight dip, maybe about less than 1%. Mumbai handled about 30 million, and similarly Hyderabad and Bangalore also saw a significant amount of air traffic. Now, this is a comparison with 11th plan and the 12th plan, 12th five-year plan. The airport sector investment was close to $8 billion, out of which 70% came from the private sector in the 11th five-year plan. The same for the current 12th five-year plan. We expect about $12 billion to be spent on airports modernization, essentially Tier 2 and Tier 3 airports, which is being opened up now, out of which over $9 billion is expected to be spent by the private sector. So you see the huge level of expectation from the private sector in terms of these critical infrastructure development. I just want to share with you one important finding of by NCA, National Council for Applied Economic Research. In fact, last year they did an economic impact study as to what kind of multiplier effect do these airport investments have on the economy, on the local economy and the national economy. Some very revealing figures came out of the Delhi Economic Impact Study as well as the Hyderabad Impact Study. As you will notice, in case of Delhi, the contribution to the Delhi's SDP, State Domestic Product, was close to 14% because of this investment in airport investment in Delhi. It also has a huge multiplier effect in terms of employment generation. We have close to 64,000 direct employment, 4.5 lakhs of indirect employment through the multiplier effect, and over 1 million of induced impact, which is essentially things like tourism and FDI, etc. So that's the level of economic impact that an airport investment creates. It's still considered to be elitist, but the fact of the matter is that airport investments do draw a huge amount of, create a huge amount of multiplier effect. Same thing in case of Hyderabad also. The scale is little 1/4 of Delhi, but what came out of this economic impact study was very similar to what the figures for Delhi revealed. In fact, this report was released by Dr. Abdul Kalam, ex-president, last year. Coming to the case study of Delhi International Airport, which I wanted to take you through specifically. It was in 2005 that GMR group, they were actually a very small group till about 2000. Prior to 2000, they were just a first generation entrepreneurial company with investments into sugar and jute, etc. But when the infrastructure opened, they had the advantage of being the early movers into that space. And the best part about GMR Group was that they had that entrepreneurial drive in their DNA, which sort of enabled them to form quick consortiums. I'll show you, in fact, for Delhi Airport, Delhi and Mumbai Airport, when this was the evaluation criteria, when it was opened up for competitive bidding. And this is the comparison of the bids. Both in case of Delhi and Mumbai Airport, GMR had a consortium with Frankfurt Airport and Malaysian Airport. Fraport, because of their operational capability of managing large airports, and Malaysian airports was more on account of commercial excellence. So they had their strength on the commercial, and GMR, of course, being the project developers, they became the major stakeholders in this consortium. So it was in 2004-05 when GMR had a choice between Delhi and Mumbai Airport. In both the airports bid, the consortium had put up the best technical consortium, both in terms of management capability as well as developmental capability. And however, government, as part of its de-risking, they said you have to choose between Delhi and Mumbai. You can't have both. So in view of Delhi's potential to grow the traffic up to 100-150 million, we decided to take the Delhi airport as part of the 60-year concession. If you look at the revenue share, which was our revenue share was little lower than Reliance ASA consortium. So as part of the Delhi airport, we had to actually match that, because we had the highest number of points for management as well as developmental capability. There was an important point that Mumbai airport was much more profitable at that juncture, because the profile of passengers, air travelers who were passing through Mumbai was far superior to Delhi when this decision was taken. So in terms of internal cash resources being generated from the operations, Mumbai was far more attractive, but Mumbai being a constrained airport in terms of its ability to expand, it was felt that Mumbai will get choked, and that's what is happening now. In another 2-3 years' time, probably it will hit the saturation limit, and beyond that, beyond 40 million passengers, Mumbai will be difficult to expand because of the surrounding. You can't have third runway or the second runway. They do have 2 runways, but they are at X, so only one runway is operational. So this was the history behind how we decided to zero in on Delhi airport out of the 2 metro. But Delhi, even today, handles close to 27-28% of the total air traffic capacity in India. We have about 1,000 flights every day, and more than 1 lakh passengers using Terminal 3 and T1D every day. Once we decided to go ahead with Delhi Airport, these are the 2 critical agreements that we entered into with the government. One was called POMDA, which is Operations, Maintenance and Development Agreement with the Airport Authority, and the other was with Government of India, which is called the State Support Agreement, in terms of what were their delivery commitments in terms of state support. This was the shareholding that I mentioned. GMR Group had 54%, Malaysian Airport 10%, Fraport of 10%, and Airport Authority of 26%. The important point here is that the government exchequer gets 46% of the total revenue generated by Delhi Airport. And I'm told Delhi and Mumbai Airport today, they contribute something like 3,000 crores to the Airport Authority, the exchequer, without they doing anything. In fact, they just being the concession authority, being the GOI. Which that 3,000 crore becomes a kitty towards plowing back that money into expanding or modernizing the capacity of other airports like Chennai, Calcutta, Kolkata, etc. And now they are looking at Tier 2 and Tier 3 airports. Okay. And now post signing the agreement, you'll be inquisitive to know as to how did GMR overcome the challenges and the constraints Essentially, the challenges were on four fronts. The timelines were very still. By the time we got the airport handed over to us, it was 2007, and one of the important parameters was that the airport has to be ready before commencement of the Commonwealth Games, which was the back end. And we just had about 40 months to deliver that, so the timelines were very stiff. Financing such large projects was something which was new to the financial institutions in India and the banking industry in India, because they didn't know how to appraise such large projects. Of course, it coincided with the 2008 meltdown, the global meltdown also, wherein there was very little appetite for funding, and also India's risk rating also went up quite significantly. The third challenge was availability of local talent. We had the talent from Airport Authority, but being in GUI, yes, they had their own constraints. The fourth challenge, of course, was extensive stakeholder engagement. That there were some 67 or close to 70 agencies, 70 different departments to be dealt with, like Department of Environment, Department of Forest, Department of, you name it, and you had to deal with them in terms of putting all the approvals in place before you commence work on the modernization and the expansion. So let's look at each of them. The first one about the critical timelines. The traditional approach of executing such large projects has been more sequential. From the master plan, you go to design, and then you go to construction. GMR, of course, knew very well that if you follow the conventional approach, probably delivery of this project will not be possible. So we adopted a unique method of doing the design and construction in parallel. So it was important to put some of these activities in parallel to ensure that we were able to deliver on time. This led us to saving of about 12 months of execution time. So if you see, the design and construction have been made in parallel. We are parallelly having you do the design, part design, and start the construction activity. Of course, there are some demerits of this fast track approach also, because the capital cost would not be frozen. It had to be kept open-ended. Because if you freeze everything and then you go to the construction phase, then you would have lost about 12 months. So this was one critical difference in the conventional projects are executed. So it was a cost-plus engineering procurement construction contract, which enabled us to cut down the execution time by about a year. The second about the financing aspects of such large infra projects. In fact, if you see, the project cost was close to 13,000 crores. That is $2.5 billion. Now, since Airport Authority was a partner, the debt equity that we actually adopted for this project became little difficult for AI to expand beyond a certain stage. Because the demands for additional facilities kept on increasing, but Airport Authority's inability to plow in the required equity led us to think innovative ways to. So if you look at some of the property development deposits, these are refundable deposits that we generated out of the land bank that was along with the 5,000 acres of airport zone in Delhi. 5% of the total land which was given to us was allowed to be commercially exploited, so about 240 to 250 acres. We raised some deposits as part of the first wave of monetization, and which was used as a funding. Effectively, 1471 crores is essentially out of those deposits. The other critical component which was different from conventional funding was to look at a development fee. Now, this airport development fee is a means of plugging the funding gap as part of ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, allows this as a possible window. But in India, since this was the first major private project in airports, this was being experimented for the first time. But it did attract a lot of negative criticism by the air travelers, the media, etc., which we had to handle quite differently. So the development fee actually gave us a possible financing option of 3,500 crores. So a lot of innovation went into even the financing structure for this large project. Thirdly, the talent availability was a major constraint, as Indian aviation sector was quite confined to government-dominated airport authority only. We started assembling a team of global talent. They were expats working from 25 different nationalities. And we had training being conducted at Fraport and Malaysia, etc., to train our people to ramp up their capability quite fast. So this was one approach wherein we got majority of the global talent to help us move on the learning curve faster. There was also this sporadic, if you look at seamless transition, there was a special team from Munich Airport which helped us in operation readiness and transfer, which was again a unique thing for India. Coming to 50 government departments, actually it was 70. I don't know why 50 has been mentioned, but there were closer to 50 departments, close to 70 departments rather, which were required to be kept in the loop in getting approvals. There, of course, again, it was more behavioral to get them engaged in the process of constructing Delhi Airport. Apart from these challenges, there were also this economic crisis which compounded our ability to raise finances. The raw material prices, especially the construction material like steel, cement, etc., they went through the roof in 2009, in fact, post the economic crisis of 2008. There was absence of inbuilt drawings, which may be expected because these airports were constructed 50, 60 years back in Delhi and Mumbai. It became a challenge as to how where are the pipelines going. In fact, those drawings were not available. So there was a lot of chaos actually in between which, yes, Indian travelers had to undergo that. Just to show you some of the other comparable projects as to what was the delivery time. If you look at Heathrow, for example, they had Terminal 5. T5 is the latest, which was, I think, delivered in around 2006, of a 28 million ton plus 28 million passengers per annum capacity. It took them about 6 years to construct. Similarly, the Beijing airport, which was just prior to the Beijing Olympics, they took 52 months to construct a 43 million passenger handling capacity terminal in Beijing. So as compared to these, Delhi T3 was delivered in 37 months, which was quite commendable, in fact, even by global standards. Terminal of 5 lakh square meter capacity and 34 million passenger handling capacity. From one end of the pier to the other end of international pier, in fact, the distance can be about 3 to 4 kilometers. We have been criticized for having such layout, which, one of my friends who was passing through Delhi Airport one day, he said, why are you forcing me to do the morning walk in the terminal? So, but nevertheless, I think it's a pleasure walking through the terminal from one end. You have 78 travel letters which help you in moving fast. But nevertheless, I don't mind doing my morning walk every day. Okay. So what came out was it's not the 8th largest terminal, it's actually the 5th largest terminal. Let me correct that, I think it was wrongly put. There are 78 aero bridges in Delhi T3 terminal, which is the highest in any terminal across the globe. The longest travelator in Asia, which is about over 100 meters. And the best part about Delhi Airport is that it is blessed with 3 runways. 3 runways which gives them huge capacity on the air side in terms of air traffic movement that Delhi Airport can handle, unlike Mumbai. As I said, this was one of the criteria for not choosing Mumbai. The 3rd runway was, of course, constructed by us only, by JMR, which is the longest Code F compliant runway, which can handle these Airbus A380s and these large, very large aircrafts categorized as Code F. Now, in terms of service quality, what we know as what is called as ASQ, the rating is done every year by Airports Council International Montreal, and it's used as a benchmark for sort of knowing where you are in terms of service level quality. Just to tell you, Indian airports prior to modernization were around 159. I think the best rank for an Indian airport was 159. Today, we can proudly say that Delhi Airport is the second best in the world in its category of 25 to 40 million passengers, and fourth best overall. The best being it was quite a change, quite a mindset change, moving from 150th position to becoming the second best or the fourth best in the world overall. We have still to catch up, and our aspiration is to become the best in the world by 2015. That's our internal aspiration that we have set. I'll skip this slide because this just shows the amount of contribution that it's making to the national exchequer per annum. If you look at the bar chart on the right, 1,500 crores was in FY13, which was contributed to the national exchequer. This also has the first airport in India which has got multimodal connectivity. You have the airport Metro Express coming right below Terminal 3. It's similar to Changi or Hong Kong, Chaplak-Kok, or even Heathrow, for example. Most of the modern terminals across the globe have got the metro connectivity right below the terminal. The utilization has been a bit of a disappointment as of now, but I'm sure going forward the metro will become a major mode of connecting to the airport from other parts of the city in Delhi. Delhi already has over 200 kilometers of metro network, but this was special. This was Airport Express, which is connected to the Delhi station, and the idea was to take the passengers who were coming from, say, other catchment areas like Jaipur or Lucknow. They can immediately take the Airport Express. I just want to show you the change because it has been taken. So these were some of the snaps. Now, just to tell you about some of the forecasts made about Indian air traffic projections by Ministry of Civil Aviation. It shows that we should be reaching about close to 400 million passengers by FY20. That's the 2020 Vision 2020 for the ministry. So, in fact, these all have been enabled by some of the major policy pronouncements which happened in the last couple of years. I'm sure as medical students you must be tracking the major shifts that are happening in these sectors. FDI was allowed into airlines, into domestic carriers last year. And you must have read about the Jet Etihad deal or the AirAsia deal which has happened. These are the early beneficiaries of this FDI being enhanced to 49%. The external commercial borrowing limits for infra for airports has been increased to 1 billion. Of course, I think needs to go much beyond this. The aviation turbine fuel, which is the biggest component of the air travel, if you look at the cost structure of airlines, depending on whether it's a full service carrier or a low cost carrier, the fuel cost can be from anywhere from 35% to 55%. For low cost carriers, the ATF constitutes almost about 50%, 50 to 55% of the total cost. And the reason why ATF is more expensive in India has been primarily because of our tax structure. We have varying rates of VAT across states. There are some states who offer incentives like Chhattisgarh, and in fact last week the Chief Minister of West Bengal declared Durgapur and Bagdogra as for these two airports the VAT on ATF is going to be free, 0%. But on the other hand, you have got airports like Hyderabad, Bangalore, etc., where the VAT is as high as 28 to 30%. So that makes the viability of aviation turbine fuel for these airlines a lot tougher. The other major thing which happened last year was right of first refusal to the national carrier, that's Air India, on foreign routes. In case of foreign routes, what happens is they are governed by bilateral agreements with these nations. You must have read about a lot of controversy regarding the Abu Dhabi deal, and the Jet Etihad deal, which happened immediately after India enhanced the bilaterals with Abu Dhabi. Now, in the earlier regime, Air India had the first right. Whenever there was an increase in capacity in supply side, Air India had the first right. They can take up, say, 30% or 50% of that, and then the other airlines had the choice of choosing. That has gone now. In fact, so they are on a level playing as far as other private airlines are concerned. Rest, in fact, there is a civil aviation policy which is currently being drafted. I'm also part of that ministry's committee, which hopefully will lead to provide the greater impetus for air travel in India. Of course, there have been certain challenges in terms of environmental issue, especially the EU region, European Union region, is planning to impose carbon tax, which makes traveling to Europe a lot costlier. The entire world has been resisting that, but let's see how it pans out, because that will affect. As it is, the European EU economies are actually contracting rather than growing, in fact. So there is a bigger challenge for them to how they balance the environmental concerns and the economic concerns. Social activism like Telangana, which is now seeing at the end of the tunnel, they are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. But yes, it has impacted air travel. There's a lot of investments which were to happen in AP have got affected by that. I'll skip the remaining part and come to just to give you a glimpse about other airports that we have in the GMR Group airports portfolio. GMR is now the world's fourth largest private airport developer in terms of passenger volumes. I said private developers. Majority of the airports across the globe are owned by the governments, like in North America or in Latin America, or even Europe has got a mix of government-controlled airports as well as private airports. But in terms of the private developers, GMR is now the fourth largest airport company. Handles over 60 million passengers and about 7 lakh metric ton of air cargo. The capacity, of course, is much ahead of demand. That's something close to 100 million passengers. So we are operating, you can say, at 60% capacity utilization. The challenge is always to create supply ahead of demand. That has been the Chinese model. I was in China, in fact, in my earlier role in industry. I went to 7 cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Tianjin, Ningbo, etc. And the kind of infra development that has happened in China is amazing. Bridge which was constructed in Shanghai, connecting one of the islands, which was 36 kilometers into the sea. I asked them how much time. They had an 8-lane bridge connecting from the mainland to that island. And on that island, they had constructed a 100 million ton of deep sea harbor, which you don't have in India, in fact, those having deep drafts. I asked these Chinese guests, or our hosts in fact, they said it just took 34 months to construct that 36-kilometer long, 8-lane freeway to the island. So that's the kind of commitment that Chinese have done in the infra development, in fact. So the philosophy that I was coming to was that GMR also has a philosophy of creating supply ahead of demand, and we as a nation, I think we are getting used to that. There are some upwards of capacity being created much ahead of demand because somebody has to pay for it. So that becomes an issue in terms of higher airport charges. Yeah, this we have seen. I'll skip this. Just some of the snaps of Indira Gandhi International Airport, Delhi. These are timelines. Again, in my earlier slides, I did show this. Now coming to, okay, this is 250 acres of Aerotropolis development that we are trying to develop, the Aero City. Some of you who may have traveled through Delhi may have seen the airport city development which is happening just outside Terminal 3. There are some 5,000 rooms of 3-star to 7-star category which are coming up just outside Terminal 3. In fact, 3 of them got they went to commercial operation only just 2 days back. Now coming to Hyderabad Airport, which is the Rajiv Gandhi International Airport, which was the first greenfield airport. Delhi Airport, we don't call it as greenfield, it was a brownfield airport for us, brownfield expansion. This is Rajiv Gandhi International Airport, which was rated as the best in ASQ in its category of 5 to 15 million passenger handling capacity. Hyderabad also has the second longest runway of 4.26 kilometers, again capable of handling ODF Airbus A380 variety. Just to show you some of the snaps for Hyderabad, this is Hyderabad, the Rajiv Gandhi Airport. It's excellent. Again, we have seen these airports in other countries also of this similar category, but they are phenomenal in fact. Yeah. This was the timeline for Hyderabad Airport. Then we have, I'll skip this because in Hyderabad also we have about 1,500 acres of aerotropolis getting created. The concept of aerotropolis is, traditionally you have seen that the airports come within the city. You know, you have a city and you have an airport coming within the city. The next wave of sort of concept of airport development is you create an airport and a city will come around it. That's what is being adopted in the case of Hyderabad, where the airport is about 45 kilometers from the city center. The earlier airport was in Begumpet, yeah, you're right, Begumpet. And the new one, of course, is in Shamshabad, which is almost about 45 kilometers. And in fact, a new township, totally new aerotropolis is now coming up with a lot of aviation companies also setting up their infrastructure, including Tata Agusta, for example, is setting up their assembly plant of these helicopters in our aerotropolis. So it's a totally new concept which is being experimented in Indian airports. The third one is the Sabiha Gökçen International Airport in Istanbul, which is our one of our overseas ways. In fact, this was again delivered in 18 months' time. But we had a very strong local partner in Istanbul, the Limak Group, which are our partners in this venture. In fact, we had the fourth airport also, as some of you may know, the Maldives International Airport, Mali International Airport, which was our gateway to the entire 1,200 islands of Maldives. Unfortunately, when the government changed last year from President Nasheed to the other gentleman who was his vice president in a coup which happened last year, our asset got expropriated in the process. So we are currently in the arbitration process, and we are hopeful that something positive may come out of that arbitration in Maldives. So these are the three airports in our airports portfolio: Delhi, Hyderabad, and Istanbul. In terms of our capability building, we have developed capability in bidding, that is at the RFQ and the RFP stage. Development, that is boxing up all the contracts, which is post-award. The construction management, we have an EPC company within our group, and also GMR Airport Developers Limited, which helps us in construction. And of course, commissioning, we have got huge expertise, and operations. Now, just to summarize, the public-private partnership model, yes, it's very relevant for our context, and it will continue to be the dominant mode for infra development in India. Emerging markets, of course, they rely heavily on private sector for making major contributions to these critical infrastructure development. Of course, Delhi Airport has huge lessons for our PPP models to be followed. There are several learnings, I'm sure there are going forward. Of late, you must have seen some of these infra projects are facing a lot of headwinds. For example, the Delhi-Gurgaon highway also, there have been concerns, and the operator who's, there are of course issues with the maintenance of that, and there are other airports or other infra projects also. Recently, this Mumbai Trans-Harbour Link, which was again about, I think about 15,000 crore project, connecting the main South Mumbai to Nhava Sheva, about 22 kilometers of link over the sea. It was opened up for PPP, but nobody actually demonstrated their interest, in fact. So, because the conditions were stiff and there was lack of clarity as to how to generate revenues to make it viable. So there are concerns on the PPP, but definitely I think we as a nation will have to give a lot of attention to how do we structure our PPP projects. So every PPP of course requires customization and innovation in order to make it viable. So I have a small video about 9 minutes which I just want to share with you. It's on construction of T3. What happened? Can someone help me with this? Ah, it's there, okay. Sorry. The volume is very good. I think the speakers are not connected properly.
Indira Gandhi International Airport's new integrated passenger terminal T3. Spread over 5.02 million square feet, it is among the largest in the world. Building T3 has been a challenge, one that we value. When GMR won the bid to develop the IGI airport in 2006, it was already one of the busiest airports in Asia. Every 2 minutes, a flight took off or landed. The airport, built to handle 12 million passengers a year, was constrained by the fact that it was handling 16 million. Construction of new facilities to augment capacity had to be done without disruption of services at the existing terminals. Simultaneously, the master plan for the expansion of the airport was finalized.
That 3 years from now, we will see the world-class facility at this very place.
The new runway and passenger terminal construction had to be completed within a short span of 37 months. Similar projects across the world have taken more than 60 months. After the takeover in 2006, we set ourselves early success targets to be completed in the first 90 days. The domestic terminals were to be given a facelift and additional facilities added. The international terminal was modernized as well, with a significant increase in capacity and reduction in passenger processing time. This had to be carried out without structural changes to the terminal building. However, it was apparent that the existing terminals would not be able to handle the load of the burgeoning traffic till T3's completion. Hence, Dial took the decision to build a new domestic departure terminal 1D. This was only possible after the relocation of nearly 60 functional airport buildings to newly built facilities. The absence of maps and as-built drawings of existing utilities, which had been installed decades ago, made this task more complex. Many encroachments also had to be cleared. With the inauguration of T1D in 2009, IGR Airport's capacity exceeded the demand for the first time in more than a decade. Similarly, airside infrastructure was enhanced while the airfield was in use 24/7. A dedicated team focused on the new runway to reduce congestion in the air. The new runway 2911 is one of Asia's longest runways and is capable of handling the largest aircraft such as the Airbus A380.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
It was inaugurated 6 months ahead of schedule in 2008, despite facing several roadblocks. Among them was the problem of city sewage flowing in the area earmarked for the runway. Today, IGI Airport is India's only airport to have 3 operational runways. The Integrated Passenger Terminal, T3, is an engineering marvel. The 9-level building is spread over a footprint of 20 acres and with piers stretching for 1.2 kilometers on either side. It is India's largest public building constructed since independence. T3 houses 78 aero bridges, the most in a single airport terminal. Equipped with state-of-the-art facilities for smooth passenger transit. It will also have eco-friendly features to reduce its energy consumption. T3 will be the first in India to have a dedicated metro rail link to the city centre. The extensive retail and F&B facilities spread over 20,000 square meters are world-class as well. track record of delivering complex infrastructure projects in record time. The Hyderabad Airport was inaugurated 6 months ahead of schedule. The ISGIA in Turkey was opened a year before the deadline set. Today, Delhi gets a new landmark and the country a new gateway to the world. This could not have been achieved without the support of the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the Government of Delhi, and is a true example of a public-private partnership. GMR and its consortium partners, Airports Authority of India, Pratt, and Malaysia Airports Holdings Berhad, as custodians of this national asset, request the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and Chairperson of UPA, Srimati Sonia Gandhi, to dedicate Terminal 3 to the people of India.
Last one which I wanted to share with you. Just want to end with a small quote by Dr. Kalam. Essentially, he had mentioned once that you have to dream before your dream comes true. So relentless pursuit of your dream can only make those dreams come true in your life. And this has been the guiding philosophy in GMR. So just 10 years back, I don't think we could have imagined that such world-class infrastructure will be available in India also. So it's all about the power of dreaming. Thank you.
Questions? Louder.
Good morning, sir. So my name is Prakhar Gowal. Sir, recently GMR pulled out of a major highway project in the NCR region. So, could you tell us what changed between when the GMR bid for the project and the present situation, which made it which forced it out of the project? And the second question is, you pulled out of this GMR, this highway project. You faced problems in Maldives. So, what is the road ahead for GMR in infrastructure space?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the highway project that you are referring to is basically the Kishangarh Udaipur Ahmedabad Highway, KUA, which is about 500 kilometers, which was awarded to GMR Group in 2011. Okay, that was the year in which I had joined actually. It's not in NCR, by the way. It's actually Kishangarh in Rajasthan connecting to Ahmedabad in Gujarat. It had a capital outlay of close to 9,000 crores, but there were certain responsibilities which government had to perform, certain obligations which GOI had to perform before the asset was handed over to GMR. It had a period of about 6 months to 1 year within which GOI had to do that. Because beyond that, the viability of that investment would have been questionable. The asset could not be handed over to GMR within the stipulated time. And in turn, because we had done the financial closure, everything was in place. But the requisite approvals were not in place. So we decided to have a look at it and surrender that concession agreement that we had. Secondly, looking at, yes, there have been some setbacks. You mentioned about Maldives Airport. Maldives was more of, I would say, something beyond our control. The only thing which we could have taken was to take political cover for that, in retrospect, which had not happened because India and Maldives being in South Asia had excellent relations at the political level, and we thought the political risk is not required. We hope something positive will come out of the arbitration proceedings which is happening in Singapore at the moment. Maybe another 6 months' time, we should see something positive coming out of that. In terms of the growth roadmap going forward, while these airports will provide, they'll have their organic growth happening in due course. The inorganic ambitions of looking at foreign footprints is still there. You may have read some news item about GMR being shortlisted for the Cebu Mactan Airport in Philippines, which is the second largest after Manila. Okay, as compared to Delhi, of course, it's much small, but it's closer to Hyderabad with good amount of tourist traffic, about 7 to 8 million. We are seriously looking at that airport, and hopefully by October, November, the bid should happen. We are among the 6 who are shortlisted for that. So we are continuously looking at the airport opportunities in Southeast Asia, in Middle East. We had looked at the Brazilian airports in 2012 when Sao Paulo and 2 more of these airports were up for bidding. But again, the commitment was that it had to be up before the Brazilian Olympics and the World Cup, which is happening in Sao Paulo in 2014. So we weighed the risk of doing in a foreign terrain, and we decided not to finally put in our bid, although we were shortlisted for the Brazilian airports also. So it's a continuous process. We have our M&A team or the BD team working, business development team, continuously scanning the airports landscape all across.
Good morning, sir. I'm Hari Kishan. With respect to going for a particular opportunity, this particular, bidding for any particular airport is a big task. As in, the funds or the opportunity is very big. So, first point is the period, 4 or 5 years is a big time. So we can expect, there will be so many unexpected things that can happen. And second is like, since the expected returns or the investment opportunity is big, you will be having big competitions. So high uncertainties implies you have to take care of the things which you might not expect, and hence you have to go for a conservative thing. At the same time, for the competition, you have to cut down the cost. So how do you take care of these 2 things? Basically, what I mean to say is the financial bit, and how important is this financial bit with respect to the complete bid. As in, when you're showing us the slide, you're showing what is the experience the particular firm is having in this particular thing, then what is the financial bit and the future and other stuff. So how important is the financial part of it?
Extremely important. In fact, recently in Turkey, Istanbul has got 2 international airports. One is with us and the other one is with TAV. TAV Airports is the 3rd largest in the world in terms of, they have something like 15-20 airports all across. The big one is Atatürk in Istanbul, and the remaining 15 are smaller ones. Turkey, as a part of their national priorities, they floated a tender for developing 150 million passenger handling capacity new airport, the 3rd international airport in Turkey, which becomes a gateway for entire Asian traffic going towards North America and Middle East traffic going towards North America. So developing it as a hub with 150 million, none of the airports across the world have got that kind of a capacity. I'll tell you, TAV was the incumbent airport developer and operator in Turkey. When the 3rd airport bid came in, because the first airport that they are currently operating will close down after this 3rd airport is commissioned. So they had the most amount of thing to lose. So the desperation factor for TAV was the highest, but yet they had a Sunny Seller, who's Saint Seller, of course. We interact with him in global aviation forums. They were very clear about their walkout price as to beyond which the third airport was not feasible. The bids went up to $22 billion of commitment to Turkish exchequer. TAV walked out. TAV walked out of that consortium because they had a clear-cut. Similar thing is with GMR also. In fact, we bid for Izmir Airport about a year back. Izmir is another second busiest airport in Turkey. And we bid which was less than half of what the final value at which the airport went. So we are giving a lot of importance to the financial numbers also. Winning is one thing, but creating value out of those assets is a bigger challenge. And that's where I think the financial bids become very, very critical. Okay, so yes, the sector opened 10 years back in India. There wasn't a mad scramble for, as I said, we had the early mover advantage in case of Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad. Going forward, let's see how the competitive intensity is going to be in terms of bidding. But yes, we are very clear about that. Beyond a certain value, you cannot create value. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, sir. Good morning, sir. My name is Ganesh. I wanted to ask you about the airport development fee which you talked about. I remember reading about it and there was a lot of media bashing and customers were unhappy with it. Because as a customer, when I'm already paying tax, why should I be paying an additional airport development fee? So I want to know how did GMR react to it and what has been subsequent steps?
Yeah. As I mentioned during my presentation, this airport development fee is actually a funding gap allowed under the ICAO guidelines, ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. Suppose we have a project cost of 13,000 crores that we were referring to in case of Delhi Airport. And the appetite of AI and GMR with Airport Authority was X crores of equity infusion with their 26% stake. That gave us a capital cost of only 10,000 crores, which actually could be funded with equal amount of, with proportional amount of contribution by AI. How do you fund the balance 3,500 crores? So when we had exhausted all the funding options, we looked at the development fee, which is a mechanism by which actually you reduce the balance sheet size from a 13,000 crore gross block. This development fee actually reduces the overall capital base. So the capital base on which the airport fee is levied is 10,000 crores. And this 3,000 crores is only a limited window available for you to reduce it from 13,000 to 10,000. That's what is being levied today, but on 1st January 2013, in fact, on the insistence of MOCA, Ministry of Civil Aviation, we decided to reduce. It was earlier 200 rupees for a domestic passenger, it was reduced to 100 rupees. So the time for collection of the ATF gets doubled. But this will get over in another 1.5 years. So I don't think there should be any concern on the development fee, which is, I would say it's still within the ballpark for most of the airports globally. Do you have a
Where the government earns around 46%
Yeah.
of the airport revenues, around 3,000 crores.
Yeah.
So why doesn't it help in, bring the gap? Why should
No,
the customer be paying for it?
Okay. The airport development fee is not subject to 46% remission, so it's not treated as revenue. Okay. This is a balance sheet item, essentially reducing my gross block from 13,000 to 10,000 crores, which is not subject to any revenue share ramifications. Yes, this has been one of the, what you mentioned, has been one of the drawbacks of our PPP system. In fact, there have been articles that I have seen wherein people have suggested that the PPP projects should also be open for, but it may actually draw litigation. That's the main fear. That's why. Otherwise, there are many projects in the infrastructure sector which, given their current structure, they become unviable. In case of public sector undertakings also, you must have seen that the government comes up with bailout packages, for example. Air India is a classic example where huge amount of public money is likely to be spent in expanding their fleet and also, cutting down their losses. So we need to have a fresh relook at the PPP policy. How to, in case of these projects becoming unviable, how do we ensure that they remain viable? So these are thoughts, I think, which probably the country will have to grapple with, and I'm sure there's a lot of discussion happening around that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Hello sir, I am Deepak. So I want to ask that there are delays in infrastructure projects. Means in many infrastructure, for example, you can take Kolkata, means the metro has been delayed for more than 5 to 10 years. So what are the major reasons for that? Means is it that the planning is not proper on their part, or some political constraints, or means?
Well, I think each of the projects have got their unique set of problems. The problem about Calcutta Metro that you mentioned was more to do with the right of way and the land acquisition. In fact, in India, most of the projects are getting delayed or getting dropped also because of land acquisition issues. So the most critical element in any new projects is going to be land acquisition. Putting that responsibility in the private sector is going to be quite difficult, in fact. As you must have seen in case of the Tata's project for nano plant also in Singur, where they had to sort of vacate the site after almost completing the entire project. It was because of land issues and political ambivalence, I would say. So we'll have to grapple with, but yes, land acquisition is going to be tougher going forward.
Hello sir, my name is Yash, and my question is, when a company like GMR takes up a project offshore, like the project in Turkey you said, what are the challenges faced on the human resource front and the raw material requirement front? I mean, on those bases, what are the challenges that you face?
See, whenever you look at an overseas foray, in fact, the first thing you look for is a strong local partner. Okay? That has been the case in case of our Istanbul project also. We have a very strong local partner called DMAC, which is, I think, close to $10 million of, it's a $10 million group. They provided us the local support in terms of hand-holding as well as even sourcing local talent. Because it's not possible to take all the expats from India and put them in Istanbul. Same was the philosophy in my earlier organization also, in Tata's also. Like after the Chorus acquisition, in fact, there were not more than 5 to 6 people who were sent to the plants in UK and Netherlands. Only the CFO, the CEO, and maybe the chief marketing officer. There's 3 of them. You retain the organizational culture. That has been the Tata's philosophy, and in GMR also, not more than 3 to 5 people will be sent on an overseas project but develop the team locally is a critical element of success. In Maldives, I would say yes, we didn't have a partner, local partner, because Maldives was like extension of India. But yeah, we had challenges in terms of facing the political class there.
Sir, on 15th August, Prime Minister announced that Indian government will be taking up building 8 new airports. So, GMR Group is one of the leaders in this field, but as far as I know, it has taken up many power projects. It is already in construction of many power projects. Sir, so how does GMR look at this opportunity?
GMR from literally a very small base, their capital base will be something like 70,000-80,000 crores, with majority of the power projects actually in project stage. So the drag which is there on the performance of GMR is primarily because the projects in project stage are not generating revenues. The power investments are close to 45,000 crores, so the majority of our investments are actually into power sector, something like 8,000 megawatt of capacity. The airports opportunity that you mentioned about, the Prime Minister having mentioned in his speech, Independence Day speech, we are looking at that, but whether we participate in those projects, we'll take a call as and when the clarity emerges on.
how they structure these projects, because these are going to be essentially tier 2 and tier 3 airports where the commercial viabilities will have to be assessed. Normally, to make an airport investment viable, for the air travel to increase, in fact, you have to waive off their landing fee, the airport-related charges. So where does the revenue come from? Maybe through commercial outlets, maybe through commercial property development. So one has to see as to how the regulation pans out for those 8 airports that government is talking about. In fact, they're in the process of looking at 35 airports in India. Yeah, that's right. So airport authority is actually working on those. In fact, next week I have a meeting with MOCA on that, on those, informing the policy for those tier 3 airports.
Started again in February only. And one more thing, like connectivity with the railway station, or Delhi railway station to the metro station. It is very difficult because Delhi railway station has 16 platforms. And from the first platform to reach the metro station, it's very difficult. So all these things are hindering the airport metro line being utilized in a better way. And what is being done?
Yeah, that's true. In fact, the tariff on the airport metro line has been higher than what the traveling public expects. In fact, about 100 rupees. I think it's about 150 bucks from Delhi station to airport. But as compared to other modes of transportation, I think it's worth it. In fact, if you take a cab from Delhi station to reach the airport, and the time taken, probably 150 is also worth it. But the real problem is that the current users of Airport Express are not the ones which are actually air travelers. Like we see a lot of our guys who are staying in Dwarka, for example, our employees in fact, and also our concessionaires employees. They are the ones who are using that. So naturally they'll have some concerns about high tariff because they are just traversing 4 or 5 kilometers from say from Dwarka to T3. But going forward, I think we may see that, I think it's a short-term concern at the moment, but once people develop that confidence that yes, you can check in your luggage that you come from Lucknow, give your baggage, check in at Delhi station, and then at your ease you can actually come to the Delhi airport to board your aircraft. It may take some time, but I'm sure that model will succeed because in other cities like Singapore and London, etc., it's the most common mode of transportation, in fact. The site of airport metro station, I thought it was very close to the New Delhi station. Yeah, from not the Ajmeri gate side, the other one. It's on the other side. But the moment you exit from that side, it's the closest, in fact, right there. So, yes, there were some safety issues in terms of DMRC, which had done the construction, Delhi Metro Rail Corporation. I don't think it were very serious concerns on the cracks in the pillars, but yeah, the concession had reasons for him to maybe stop the operation for a while. But after DMRC is taken back, I think things are falling in place. And we hope that the utilization will increase. Yes, commercial viability is a concern because a lot of commercial outlets which got developed in the T3 underground station and at the Aerocity station, they had to wind up because it was closed down for a while. Even some of these major outlets like Cafe Coffee Day and all these guys actually closed down. But if the traffic picks up, I'm sure all these concessions will come back and start reopening their outlets. Yeah.
Hello sir, my name is Dinesh and Actually, my question is pertaining to the Mumbai airport. So as you told that Mumbai airport, it is not possible to expand it. And government had a plan to build a new airport in Navi Mumbai. So what happened was the plan is getting delayed and the costs are rising day by day. So it is not feasible now to build a proper airport. And also as the air traffic is growing day by day, and it is also not possible to expand the Santa Cruz airport. So what do you think can be the future of the situation? It is very difficult now.
Yeah, Mumbai has been tough. In fact, Navi Mumbai, again, the major problem has been land acquisition. There are something 500 acres I have read that which is yet to be acquired from the locals. And the expectation from the locals has gone up to 20 crores per acre. Just imagine 10,000 crores of your capital cost just towards 500 acres of land. Okay? The total land I think is around 4,000 acres. But this 500 acres is what is remaining. The rest is within this SIDCO of Navi Mumbai. Just imagine 10,000 crores of maybe 20,000 crore capital cost structure. If it's towards land, it becomes a non-starter right from the beginning. And that's what the government is grappling with. How do they handle the land issue? Yes, in fact, clock is ticking fast for Mumbai airport. They are almost reaching a stage of saturation. Another 2-3 years, I think, given the air travel growth, it's going to be tough increasing the airside capacity. While the new terminal is going to be inaugurated very shortly, I think within a couple of months, the T2 of Mumbai. But the airside constraints will remain. They cannot. They'll have difficulty in going beyond 40 million passengers. Santa Cruz, the other one, which is the Juhu airport, people have been talking about that it can be used for smaller aircrafts. The main issue is that the runway length is too small, and there was a plan to have 1 kilometer of the runway actually protruding into the sea, which entails heavy capital cost again, in having the runway jutting into this. Of course, there are models like that. Like in Hong Kong, I've seen the older airport, which was in Kowloon. More than half a kilometer is actually jutting into the sea. So when you land, you go right, and if the aircraft loses, if it doesn't break on time, it goes into the sea. So Juhu is looking at that option also, but again, the commercial viability will have to be seen. I think in the meantime, Pune will attract more traffic. And Pune, there is talk of the second airport also, because the existing one is a military, is an Air Force airport. So there are restrictions. Like when once I was coming from Pune airport, and our aircraft was 22nd in the takeoff queue, because there were 21 of these Air Force aircrafts taking off within seconds, in formations. So that becomes a constraint in case of military airport. That is true for Dabolim also in Goa, which is again a naval airport. There are restrictions that between 3 to 5 or a night landing cannot be done for a commercial aircraft. So, but I see some traffic shifting to Pune in the short run. Till you have the Navi Mumbai. Navi Mumbai is I think the government of India as well as the state government needs to work very closely to ensure that it happens as fast as possible. Otherwise, it's going to be quite tricky for Mumbai's economy.
And sir, the property rates have already started rising. From 1,000 rupees per square feet, it became 6,000. And so if that project doesn't happen, then
it'll again go south. Yeah. Thank you.